So, how racist is the new Georgia election law?
Let me be crystal clear and unequivocal. This legislation is unacceptable. It is a step backwards, and it does not promote principles we have stood for in Georgia around broad access to voting, around voter convenience, about ensuring election integrity. And this is frankly just a step backwards.
Why it is so racist that President Biden supported Major League Baseball's decision to move the All-Star game out of Atlanta to Denver.
I think today's professional athletes are acting incredibly responsibly. I would strongly support them doing that.
The governor of Georgia, not pleased.
Well, it's unfortunate that Major League Baseball has caved to the cancel culture, and quite honestly, President Biden and Stacey Abrams and a lot of other people are simply lying about this bill to pressure these organizations. It's really a sad day for Major League Baseball. As somebody that grew up playing baseball as a kid and a fan, played in high school, big Braves fan. I mean, this is terrible for the organization. It's terrible for the fans. It's terrible for the small business owners in the Metro Atlanta community in our state that was looking forward to hosting this game, and it put a lot of resources into it, all because of a big lie. I mean, this bill does not suppress anything. In fact, New York, where Major League Baseball is headquarters, their voting laws are more restrictive when it comes to early voting than Georgia's are. We have 17 days of in-person early voting. New York has 10. This bill adds the opportunity for people potentially to vote on 2 optional Sundays, which would give potentially some counties 19 days. Are we boycotting them because they're in New York? No. This is just a cancel culture, and I will tell you, the people at home should be scared because their ball game is next. Their business will be next. Their way of life will be next. It is time to stand up and fight this.
And Delta, also headquartered in Georgia, made a similar comment. Now, as far as the Biden administration, the Georgia law is racist. Case closed.
It gives options to expand it, right? But it standardizes it at 5. It also makes it so that outside groups can't provide water or food to people in line, right? It makes it more difficult to absentee vote. Are those things all correct? So no, our tone is not changing.
The law requires voters, among other things, requires voters to submit a driver's license number, state identification card number, or a photocopy of an approved form of identification in order to vote absentee in the state. My goodness, how racist. Do you know how white liberals feel about the inability of blacks to get voter ID?
I'm Ami Horowitz, and I'm here in Berkeley, California to find out if voter ID laws suppress the black vote. Do you have an opinion on voter ID laws?
Yeah, they're usually pretty racist and they're bad.
I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data.
For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed. I also think there's a repression of black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the African American.
You think our economy is going to be shielded from these massive Biden tax increases? Think again. There's only one way to protect your savings, and that is to do what 10,000 other savvy investors have done, and that is to convert a portion of your retirement accounts into gold and silver with Birch Gold. When inflation hits, and it will, gold and silver will be your safe haven. Who is Birch Gold Group? As one of the top dealers of physical precious metals in the United States, Birch Gold Group helps Americans diversify their savings with gold and silver. Customers can purchase for physical possession or convert a portion of their IRA or 401k into an IRA backed by physical precious metals. Looking back historically, when the bottom falls out of everything, gold acts as a hedge. And I trust Birch Gold Group to convert your IRA or eligible 401k into an IRA backed by gold and silver. And through April 30th, on qualifying purchases, when you open a precious metals IRA with Birch Gold, they will send you a free home safe. You can't beat that. Text Larry to 474747 to get your free info kit and claim your eligibility for a free safe with qualifying purchase by April 30th. People feel about how difficult it is for black people to get ID?
Now I'm here in East Harlem to ask black people their thoughts on what you just heard. Do you have ID normally? You carry ID around?
Yes, I have state ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so like, we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. Like, that's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of trick candy camera?
I know, right? That's the only thing I brought with me.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that, on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Did you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
I know these sound like silly questions. You know how to get to the DMV?
Of course.
You know where it is?
Yes.
You can get there?
Uh-huh.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that black people, especially poor black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity, honestly. Everybody has access to the internet. Even a little kid can figure out how to work the internet.
I had access to the internet for years.
You know how to use it properly, right?
Exactly. I do it at work. So, of course, I know how to use it. My kids know how to use it. They all have iPads, iPods, whatever.
Your phone has data?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually
unlimited.
Unlimited data.
Mm-hmm. I use my phone as a hotspot.
What does that say to you for the people who have this perception of black people?
They're pretty much ignorant. That's what my thought process on.
I just think that's ignorant. Ignorant.
Ignorant. That's the word I'm hearing a lot.
Ignorant.
Ignorant.
Very, very ignorant.
Does it sound racist for somebody to say that?
I think it is a little racist because, you know, you're putting people in a category and you have no idea what you're talking about.
Maybe a little bit of racist in it, but like I said, I think it's more stupidity and ignorance.
You're judging somebody, like, but you're judging them because they're black, saying that they don't got it.
What people are they talking to? Who are these people talking to?
Do you have a problem that if you go to vote and they say, can we please see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are? Are you cool?
Love showing my ID.
You got no problem with that?
Nope.
Would you have a problem if when you go to vote, if they say, can we please just see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are? Do you have an issue with that?
No.
Would you have a problem if there was a rule where you have to show your ID in order to vote?
I don't think so. No.
Would you have an issue if there was a rule saying you got to show your ID before you vote?
Nah.
Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
Did anybody on the left ever bother to, read the law?
The Senate Judiciary and Rules Committees have started their work responding to the concerted nationwide attack on voting rights of millions of Americans that we haven't seen since the era of Jim Crow.
I do absolutely agree that it's racist. It is a redux of Jim Crow in a suit and tie.
This is nothing but punitive, designed to keep people from voting. You can't provide water for people about to vote. Give me a break.
It bodes to moving back to Jim Crow era kind of legislation. The impact certainly has the potential to reduce voters, particularly of color.
But this bill seems very much aimed at two things, in my view. Number one, and making it much harder for black and brown folks, particularly in places like Fulton County, to vote, and also maybe getting Brian Kemp reelected.
It's offensive, it's racist, it's pointless, it's non-productive, and that's why people like Latasha Brown and Black Voters Matter and the New Georgia Project and everyone else is organizing down there to put pressure on Coca-Cola, Delta, and everybody else, because these laws aren't just foolish. These laws aren't just racist, but they are destructive to a functional democracy.
As to how the law allegedly shortens the time allowed to vote, even the Washington Post gave that assertion 4 Pinocchios. That's as bad as you can get. On Election Day in Georgia, polling places are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p. And if you are in line by 7 p, you are allowed to cast your ballot. Nothing in the law changes those rules. However, the law did make some changes to early voting, but experts say the net effect was to expand the opportunities to vote for most Georgians, not limit them. Not a single expert we consulted understood why Biden made this claim. Somehow Biden managed to turn that expansion into a restriction aimed at working people, calling it, quote, among the outrageous parts, close quote, of the law. There's no evidence that is the case. The president earns 4 Pinocchios, end of quote. Florida freshman Republican Byron Donalds.
Democrats are saying these are Jim Crow laws, are they?
The Democrats are race baiting. They are wrong. Look, I've reviewed the Georgia law myself. What Georgia's doing is the absolute right thing. I know the president's running around trying to tell people that you can't give somebody a cup of water, but that's not what Georgia law says. What Georgia law says is that you can't give people something of value when they're in lines getting ready to vote because, you know, we don't want to buy off votes in America. That's like a sound concept. That's what we should be doing. The other thing that's happening in these voting lines, people are getting these voter cards when they're also getting something of value in the lines. And so the Georgia legislature is right to get rid of that provision in Georgia law and make sure that they can't do those things. That's simple stuff, John. This is not what they're trying to say. They're trying to race bait because they know they got the argument wrong and they don't have a leg to stand on, so they got to use race.
Must be an Uncle Tom. One more time. Have these people bothered to read the freaking law?
But no, hey, look, I think the first thing the president ought to do is learn to read, because undoubtedly his staff or him have a problem reading the bill. They're wanting to push a narrative that Georgia is this state that has been going through voter suppression, keeping people away, and the very facts are just not true. Our minority participation over the last 3 election cycles have increased dramatically among African Americans, Hispanics, and others. This is just a bill in which, if you read the bill itself, it actually expands voting hours. It takes things that were once illegal in our state, such as drop boxes. They were used illegally in the last election. They are now legal under law. I mean, it's just when you want to pitch a narrative, you're willing to throw any pitch, even if it's in the dirt, and call it a strike.
This is from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Spoiler alert, they did not endorse Donald Trump for president. Georgia voters must now request ballots at least 11 days in advance. Previously, most counties allowed voters to request ballots up until the Friday before Election Day. And about voter verification, Georgia will become one of 4 states that require voters to submit driver's license number or other ID number. The others are Kansas, Minnesota, and Ohio. Many states require a driver's license or other ID to register to vote or to vote in person. Racist? What about the Gallup poll in 2016 that asked voters about voter ID? Though many of the arguments for early voting and against voter ID laws frequently cite minorities' voting access, non-whites' views of the 2 policies don't differ markedly from those of whites. 77% of non-whites favor both policies, while whites favor each at 81%. End of quote. Racist?
I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that on 25th Street.
Oh, there was a study that purported to show that these alleged voter suppression laws really dampen minority turnout. But a follow-up paper by professors from Stanford, Penn, and Yale reached an entirely different conclusion. Their conclusion? These laws don't have much of an effect either way. Widespread concern that voter ID laws suppress turnout among racial and ethnic minorities has made empirical evaluation of these laws crucial. In English, that means a lot of people are saying these laws are suppressing the minority turnout. So we decided to take a look at the paper that said so, and we found they were wrong. We showed that the result of the paper, the one that found a negative effect on these alleged voter suppression laws, are a product of data inaccuracies, and the presented evidence does not support the stated conclusion. When errors are corrected, one can find positive, negative, or null estimates of the effect of the voter ID laws on turnout, precluding firm conclusions, end of quote. In other words, it is a lie that these laws are suppressing the vote. But that does not get in the way of a good story, does it?
And so here he is doing exactly what he accused President Trump of doing back during the campaign, and doing it in a way that is just brutally bad. I mean, even the Washington Post gave him 4 Pinocchios for the statements that he made. The Washington Post guy, you can imagine how it pained them to have to do that to their hero, this Democratic president.
What I think is so fascinating about this is Lester Holt's current colleagues include Rachel Maddow, who's the chief promulgator of the Russia collusion hoax, Joy Reid, who says that there were time travelers who hacked her blog years ago, and that's why there were things on there that she didn't want to admit that she had written, Al Sharpton, whose race hoaxes have a body count, and Brian, whatever his last name is, who's one of their main hosts right now, who's a serial fabulist, who is constantly saying that, Brian Williams, who says he's been in places that he hasn't been. The idea that NBC News, any of these people, would be in a position where they could say what truth is or what reality is, when the better guide is, if they've said it, it's probably not true. And we have decades of experience here with people making up stories, always about Republicans, always about conservatives, whether it's the New York Times and that fake scanner story about President George H.W. Bush, or Dan Rather falling for that story about George W. Bush, or the Russia hoax, or the Kavanaugh conspiracy. They always make up stories that are completely unsupported by the facts, and they push them out there. And the idea that they would be in a position to say anything about this, nobody should take them seriously, and people should laugh in the face of anyone who says that they are good arbiters of what is true and what is not true. They are anything but. They just issue straight up propaganda.
President Joe Biden calls the Georgia law worse than Jim Crow. He says it's worse than Jim Eagle.
I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
Worse than Jim Crow, Mr. Biden? My parents were born in the Jim Crow South. Worse than literacy tests given to people who are illiterate? Worse than poll taxes required to people who are dirt poor? Worse than grandfather clauses allowing blacks to only vote if their grandfather could vote? Are you smoking something? So what's the effect? Major League Baseball moves the All-Star game out of Atlanta, a city of about 50% black population, to Denver, a city that's got less than 10% black population, at the cost to the local Atlanta economy and the benefit to the local Denver economy of $100 million. I tell you, I'm Larry Elder, and we've got a country to save. I'll see you next time. And don't forget, we have been demonetized by YouTube, which means we must be doing something right. To get me on demand and unedited, just go to LarryTube.com. That's LarryTube.com, because we've got a country to save. See you next time.